Hey gamers, welcome back to another Minecraft video. As you guys read in the title of this video, I will be spending the next week trying to learn 3 languages at the same time. Those 3 languages are Portuguese, Italian, and French. These languages make up 3 of the 5 major Romance languages, with the other 2 being Spanish and Romanian. I feel like I already have a pretty decent grasp on the Spanish language. I think I could hold my conversations pretty well to the point where if I were dropped off in the middle of Granada or Santiago, I think I could find my way around pretty okay. I also want to limit myself to just 3 languages because I feel like trying to keep track of more than 3 at the same time would just be too much for me to handle, and I feel like I wouldn't even be able to learn them properly. So I'll just have to save Romanian for next time. I've seen a lot of videos like this here on YouTube where people try to learn a language in a week, and all of them have different reasons for starting a new language. Some of them want to be able to reconnect with their heritage, some of them plan on moving to a country where that language is spoken, and some of them just want to be able to speak to their foreign friends. And as for my reason, I decided to start learning these 3 languages, Portuguese, Italian, and French, because I figured it would be something fun to do. You know, I don't really do that much these days because I'm always at home because I can't leave my house. And I don't really do that much productive work these days because I'm done with high school and college hasn't started yet. So I figured starting some new languages would be something both fun and productive to do. I've never really tried doing something like this before, where I'm intensively self-studying a language for a prolonged period of time. Usually in the past, when I've tried self-studying languages, I did a couple minutes of Duolingo every day until I eventually forgot about it and stopped doing it. But this time is going to be different because I'm putting this on YouTube so I can hold myself accountable. Today is day 0, which means for the next 7 days, I'm going to be trying to learn as much Portuguese, Italian, and French as I possibly can. And to do that, I'm going to be studying from this book. It's called The Comparative Grammar of Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, and French. Learn and compare 4 languages simultaneously. I've definitely talked about this book on the channel before, and now it's finally time for me to get through it. As I mentioned earlier, Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, and French are all Romance languages, which means that all of them are descendant from Vulgar Latin, which in itself is descendant from Classical Latin. I already speak Spanish pretty well, and since Spanish is pretty similar grammatically to Portuguese, Italian, and French, my hope is that I'm able to pick up those other languages at a faster pace than normal. And just to set the baseline so that you guys know where I'm starting from in each of these languages, I've never studied Portuguese, Italian, or French before, so my knowledge of each language is virtually 0. I know how to say hello in each of the languages, hola, ciao, bonjour, and that's basically it. So I am starting as close to 0 as one can get. And I just want to see how far I can get in 1 week studying 3 languages at the same time. Do I think I can become fluent in 3 languages in a week? Definitely not. Do I think I could become conversational in 3 languages in a week? Probably not, but maybe. This book has about 700 pages, so if I just do 100 pages a day, I can become fluent in a week. These 3 languages are pretty similar linguistically, so how hard could it be? Alright, it's the end of the first day of studying for the Romance language grind, and I figured I would give you guys an update on how much progress I've made so far. I think I'm going to do these updates every day throughout the week so that you guys can see how much progress I make day by day. First, let's talk about my methods for actually going about learning these languages. I've already talked about the book that I'm going to be studying from throughout this week, so let's take a look at my note-taking process. As you guys might have noticed from the time-lapse earlier, I'm going to be taking all my notes on my iPad, since it's going to be a lot easier for me to stay organized with digital notes than with paper notes. So in the GoodNotes 5 app, I made a dedicated notebook to studying these 3 languages at the same time. I titled this notebook The 4 Major Romance Languages because the book that I'm studying from teaches those 4 languages at the same time. And even though I speak Spanish pretty well already, I think it would still be nice for me to take notes on it so that I can compare the grammar between Spanish and the other three languages. For this notebook, I made a special template that helps me organize my notes between the four languages. So in the top half, I have Portuguese and Italian, and in the bottom half, I have French and Spanish. And since I made this page a template, that means that every time I start a new page within this notebook, it's going to use the same template every time. Overall, I would say that I'm off to a pretty solid start so far. Today, I went over the alphabets in each of the languages, which wasn't too hard since they're all based off the Latin script, which is the same alphabet that's used in English. I also went over pronunciation in each of the languages. I would say that Portuguese and French are giving me the most trouble so far, since those two languages have a lot of nasal sounds that aren't as apparent in English. I know that I'm gonna have a pretty American sounding accent in these languages for a while. I'm not sure if that's something that I can overcome in just 1 week, but I'm just gonna give it my best shot. I also took a look at some beginner phrases in each of the languages. Ciao, mi chiamo Lordrick. Você fala inglês? Je ne parle pas français. Je suis désolé. I know it's not much right now, but it still feels pretty good to at least be able to say something in each language. I obviously still have a really long way to go, but we can only go up from here. It's the end of day 2, which means it's time for another update. Pretty decent progress today. I went over some parts of speech. Nouns, noun gender, pluralization, adjectives, adjective-noun agreement. I also learned about adverbs today, which I thought was pretty strange because the chapter about adverbs was before the chapter about verbs, but it is what it is, I guess. I'd say that it's been pretty smooth sailing so far. There are a lot of linguistic similarities between Spanish and the other three languages, which is what I was really hoping for, because that means that I can take what I know about Spanish grammar and apply it to Portuguese, Italian, and French grammar. So, for example, all of these languages have gendered nouns. So nouns can either be masculine or feminine. And the way that noun gender works in Spanish is the same as in the other three languages. And this means that I can just apply what I know about noun gender in Spanish to those other three languages. And this is really good for helping me to understand different grammar concepts in each of the languages, which is gonna help me move at a pretty good pace. I didn't quite hit the page goal for today, so I'm hoping that I can make up for it tomorrow. Hello, it's day 3, and I'm starting to get stuck. I spent the first part of today learning about articles, which wasn't too bad since the use cases for the different articles is pretty consistent with how it works in Spanish. But Italian and French have what's called the partitive article, which doesn't exist in Spanish as far as I know. And I'm not really too sure how they work yet, but that's something that I'm still working on. Then I spent the rest of the day looking at pronouns, which is where I started to have a lot more difficulty because I still haven't learned verbs. So when it comes to pronouns, I'm just memorizing words essentially. And that's not really helpful when you're trying to understand how you would apply them in actual conversations. But again, since I haven't learned any verbs yet, I can't really do anything. So then I start getting confused between direct object, indirect object, and reflexive pronouns. So right now, all the words that I know are just disconnected words. I can't really form sentences yet because, again, I haven't learned verbs yet. But verbs are covered in the next chapter I'm working on, so hopefully a lot of my issues get resolved tomorrow. But I'll see tomorrow, and you guys will see right now. Y'all, today is day number 4. And I finally learned verbs. I don't think I've ever been this happy in my life to learn verbs. I finally learned verbs. I spent most of my study time today practicing conjugations, which means that I can finally make complete sentences now. Você chega a minha casa e nos cantamos. Eu camino nel parco con la mia família. Je veux manger chigum. My sentences are still pretty basic right now, but I'm able to come up with them on my own now, which is pretty awesome. I do still have to look at conjugation tables whenever I want to say something, but eventually all of that processing is gonna happen automatically in my brain, and I'm really excited to get to that point. Will I get to that point at the end of this week? Keep watching to find out. So it's day 5 and I don't really have too much to update you guys on because a lot of what I did today is a continuation of the stuff I was doing yesterday. So that's just been a lot of learning new verbs and continuing to practice my conjugation because I want to get to the point where all the language processing happens in my head automatically and I don't have to continuously reference my notes every time I want to say something. Something really nice about the Romance languages is that since they're all descendant from the same language, there are so many cognates between them, which is really helpful when I'm trying to learn new vocabulary. Sometimes if I don't know a word in Portuguese, Italian, or French, I end up just defaulting to a Spanish word for it. And usually that doesn't work, but sometimes it does. For example, in Portuguese you have the word ajudar, which means to help, and in Spanish you have ayudar, which means to help. And sometimes it's the exact same word between two languages. For example, again in Portuguese you have comer, and in Spanish you have comer, which is the same exact word. Studying multiple languages at the same time can get pretty hectic, but in this particular case, since the languages I'm studying are so linguistically similar, I'm able to draw a lot of parallels between stuff I'm learning in one language and stuff I already know in a different language. And cognates don't only work between Spanish and one of the other languages. For example, in Italian you have mangiare, which means to eat, and in French you have manger, which means to eat. And although the pronunciation is pretty different, when you look at how the words are written, you can definitely see how the two words are closely related. Since I am learning 3 languages at the same time, something I'm pretty curious about is whether or not that's more efficient than learning each language individually. Maybe that's something I can test in the future, but at least for the time being, I'm gonna continue studying these 3 languages at the same time. And so we continue. Hello everyone, it's the end of day 6 and I've just been doing a lot more work with verbs. You know, there are so many conjugations to keep track of and there are so many tenses, which means that there are dozens of different conjugations that you have to memorize. Have I memorized all of them? No. Have I memorized some of them? I've also been working a lot with stem changing verbs and irregular verbs. I've found that if a verb is stem changing and or irregular in one language, chances are it's going to be stem changing and or irregular in all the other languages. And that's really nice because it helps me keep track of everything since it's all so consistent. I've also been working on the super irregular verbs, which are also usually the verbs you use the most in conversations, like to be, to go, to have, to do, to be. Those verbs are just super irregular, which means that there isn't really much pattern to follow, so I just have to memorize all their forms. In other news, my goal of finishing the book in a week is just not gonna happen. But tomorrow is the last day of this challenge, so I'm just gonna try to learn as much as I can with whatever little time I have left. Here we are. It's day 7, which means a week has passed. At the start of this week, I could barely even say hello in these languages. And now here I am, 1 week later, and I can make sentences. Would I say I'm fluent in any of these languages? Definitely not. Would I say I'm able to hold conversations in these languages? Kinda. I'm not sure if it's even possible to become completely fluent in a new language in just 1 week, let alone 3 languages. In the first place, is it even necessary to become 100% completely fluent in a language? I don't know every word that exists in the English language, and that hasn't really impeded my ability to communicate with other people. My goal for this week was to reach the point where I can at least hold conversations with other people in these languages. And after having studied these languages for the past 7 days, I can say that I'm well on the way there. Having started from virtually zero, I've been able to make significant progress in this past week, and that's really what it's all about. Now, even though the week is over, I still plan on continuing to study these languages. I'm not just gonna give up after a week and call it quits. It can take months and even years to truly develop your skills in a language. Maybe we'll check back in the future to see how much more I've progressed since now. But for now, I'm gonna keep at it, and I hope you guys do as well. Thank you guys for coming along, and I wish you all the best of luck on your language learning journeys. Next, I plan on making dedicated videos where I speak each of these 3 languages so that you guys can see how far 1 week of studying has gotten me. So I really hope you guys stay tuned for that. I also want to practice my conversational skills in these languages. If only I had someone to practice with.